We're now joined by Henal Patel, who is Director of Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice. Henal, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
There's a lot of things going on around the country as it relates to changing voting laws. We're taping at the end of April. This will be seen after that. In your mind, what is the biggest difference between voter suppression initiatives and what some call voter security or election security? Biggest difference?
That's a great question. And it comes down to this. This is what everyone should ask. When making decisions about what voting laws to pass, ask yourself, who is afraid of democracy and who's embracing it? And when you're thinking about democracy, it's about the voters. That's it. It is about the voters. Are we making things better for voters? And that's what comes down to whether we are actually making our democracy stronger or not. A lot of people will say under the guise that we're doing this to make the voter system stronger or not, but it comes down to, are they actually doing it? Oh, what's the precipice for their decisions? What are they actually doing? What is the impact of it? And if the impact is hurting democracy, if it's making it harder for people to vote, it's voter suppression.
From your perspective, how much of what's going on in Georgia, what's going on in other states where state legislatures and or governors are attempting to significantly change the process of how one votes, and in some cases, some say make more difficult, as the case you're making right now, how much do you believe it's based on the results of the 2016 presidential election, not to mention the Senate races in Georgia?
So much of it, almost all of it's about that. You can tell it's about that. And the funny thing about it is, in a lot of these states, they're telling you that all of this was, the election worked well, and it did. That that the election was safe, secure, and had the highest voter turnout in the country in many, many states. And that they're using a lot of the conspiracies we heard, a lot of those lies that were told right from the top, from the then president, about the system. They're using that as pretext to turn back voting rights. And we're seeing that a lot of that is the result of the actual election, what happened in those elections. And you see that based on how they're targeting what laws to push back, what laws to pull back, where they're making it for people to use drop boxes, for example.
Why is the drop box? I'm sorry for interrupting. Why is this drop box thing so important, please?
It comes down to voter access, right? In New Jersey, for example, we are right now working to expand Dropbox access. We just passed a law to make it more equitable so that you have Dropbox access in more parts of different cities than we were able to earlier. And the reason being, Dropboxes were highly successful. Voters loved them. You were able to vote 24/7. Using a Dropbox, you working around your schedule. People work different hours during the day. People have kids, dependents. It's much easier to be able to use your time to be able to cast a ballot. Rolling that back, as some states are doing, making it only available for certain hours, making only some Dropboxes available for certain times for no justification. Dropboxes are secure 24/7. There's a security camera. There's no reason to limit them, other than you don't want it to be easy for people to vote. And we're in New Jersey making it easier for people, making it easier for voters to cast their ballot.
And let me try this real quick on this. What is the rationale, the reason for why in certain states like Georgia, I believe there's an aspect of the changes that the legislation proposes is to bar giving water or providing water to people who are waiting online to vote. Help me understand what I don't understand right now.
No, I would put, at least in terms of making it make sense, right? It just comes down to this. If you're trying to do this to make our democracy better, there is no rationale. If you're trying to make it harder for people to vote, then it does. Here's why. If you're standing on long lines, and we've all seen it, we've seen it for years, not just 2020, 2016, 2012, in places like Georgia, you see long lines for people waiting to cast their ballot. People are waiting hours and hours. When you're doing that, then you're saying someone can't give you water, someone can't give you food. So in order to take care of your own needs, you have to make a choice. Do I keep standing on this line to cast my ballot, or do I go get some water? And
So if
when you're
people
making
don't
that
vote,
choice,
I'm sorry again for interrupting. You believe that it's to get people to opt to get out of that line and not vote?
it certainly gives them that option. It certainly makes it much more of a clear choice, doesn't it? It doesn't give you the thing going, here, have some water and vote.
So President Biden calls this initiative in Georgia, the election law, the effort of Governor Kemp and others, and we don't know what's going to happen. Again, we're taping at the end of April. He calls it the Jim Crow of the 21st century. How much do you believe, to what degree do you believe, Henel, these initiatives, and they're not all the same, but to change voter laws are based in race, around race, and are ultimately, quote unquote, racist?
They are. This is a redux of Jim Crow. We look at history. You know, Jim Crow laws, we hear about them, we study them, we learn about them, and everyone thinks, I think there's this idea in the country, in New Jersey, in a lot of places, that they just had laws that said, oh, hey, Black people can't vote. They weren't written like that. They just made it so it was much, much harder for people in certain areas, particularly Black voters, brown voters, to vote. And that's what this is. They are targeting. They don't like how the election turned out, so they're targeting certain areas. They're making it harder for certain places to vote, for certain groups to vote. They're putting in additional voter ID requirements that harm Black and brown voters more. That is what we're seeing.
Why is that race-based?
So you have to see the impact of it. You have to see how things are doing. Voter ID laws are a great example of it. There's people who are like, oh, you know, it's just a voter ID law. What does it actually mean?
What would you say to those people?
What you say to those people is, what does it mean when you're saying a voter ID law, right? You might be able to go to the DMV and get a license. Not everyone drives. Not everyone has a driver's license.
Not everyone can afford the insurance and or the car.
Not everyone can afford the insurance to get a driver's license. When we talk about who has those IDs, and then you talk about what are those requirements to get those IDs, you're talking about the forms of identification needed to even get a driver's license, your birth certificate, things like that, that make it much harder for people who are economically less secure. And in a lot of places, including for New Jersey, if this was the case, some of the poorest people, because of the economic disparity we see, are often Black and brown voters, but it's also young voters. We see voter ID laws harm students more than anybody else often.
Because, got 30 seconds left, because students don't necessarily have IDs for where they live. They don't have driver's licenses. It makes things harder for them to vote. So when we're looking at what laws we're passing for voters, we have to look at their impact. Is this helping voters? If it's not, why is it not? If it's harming people, who is it harming? Often it's Black and brown voters. This will not be the last conversation we have about election security, voter suppression, and a whole range of issues having to do with democracy is at a crossroads. It's not just a slogan that we have, and this has a lot to do with it. How people vote, whether they can vote, how hard it is to vote, and whether you can provide water to people waiting in line. It's not my job to give commentary. We'll just put it out there. Henel, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. I'm Steve Adubato. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by PSE&G, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Sharing Network, Prudential Financial, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and by Rutgers University, Newark. Promotional support provided by ROINJ and by CIANJ and Commerce Magazine.
Hi, I'm Joe Roth. In New Jersey, there are nearly 4,000 residents in need of a life-saving organ transplant, and one person dies every 3 days waiting for this gift of life. One organ and tissue donor can save 8 lives and enhance the lives of over 75 people. You have the power to make a difference and give hope. For information or to become an organ and tissue donor, visit www.njsharingnetwork.org and be sure to talk with your family and friends about this life-saving decision.